Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. This is being filmed on Tuesday, November the 17th, just a few days after the attack in Paris that killed over 100 people, wounded dozens and dozens of others. We'd like to talk about that, but we're going to talk about it from a different perspective, and a perspective that is very important. We want to talk about the possibility that this is a false flag operation. I'm not saying that it is, but that's got to be considered. There has to be a full and honest investigation, an independent investigation of what happened. And I'm really wondering why our media in Canada just seems to be pushing anger and fear and hate and racism and war at this point in time. The reason that we can consider that this is a false flag operation is that they, and when I say they, I mean the people who run the United States and the people who run NATO, the Western governments and intelligence agencies, have done it before. They've done exactly this before. And Walter is going to say a few words about Operation Gladio, which is the system that was used.
Yeah, Jack, I mean, it's quite a complex subject, and here we are trying to examine this in a thoughtful manner. And as you said, we're not absolutely saying this is what happened, but we are going down this trail a little bit. So
it's got to be considered.
That's right. So I'm not going to try to qualify every sentence. I'm going to examine this issue with this lens. Now, what happened after the Second World War? Just roughly, the Western powers were concerned about Soviet expansion, basically.
Or they wanted to keep themselves in power and make sure they were never pushed aside by democracy.
That's another way to put it.
Democracy, not
That's another way to put it.
expansion,
But
yes.
they claimed that they were concerned about Soviet expansionism
Yes,
and
they
Soviet-style communism. So they left in place a lot of combatants in Western Europe that were fascists and Nazis, and they were very willing to be ready to fight anything that was going to start up in Western Europe that looked like socialism or communism.
Or democracy.
Or democracy. So anyway, this Operation Gladio was formed, and it was basically loosely controlled by NATO, but by others that are hard to identify. But NATO was part of those agencies. Now, in the 1960s and 1970s, this is when it really gets interesting. Gladio carried out several attacks on civilians, particularly in Italy. We had a situation where they walked into a supermarket, gunmen, looked a lot like these guys, walked into a supermarket, started killing everybody for no apparent reason, but it really caused a lot of fear. And then they blamed it on...
So this was at the time, I guess this was a communist group that was blamed, because they were the enemy at that point.
They blamed this Red Brigade, and the Red Brigade really didn't have much organization, but they were scapegoated. There was also a bombing in the train station in Bologna in 1980 that killed 80 people. Again, just a straight-ahead attack on civilians, blamed on the Red Brigade.
And who was behind this bombing in Bologna?
Well, this is... where I think you have some information too on this, but this Operation Gladio was blamed for this.
And when we say blamed, we mean they were blamed by the governments in Europe.
That's right. And
Gladio was being run by NATO.
More or less by NATO, but this is a discussion. Now, I think you have a statement from the European Parliament about Gladio, just so people know that this is not some wild story. These are facts, well established, and I think we're going to see if people go to the URLs that we're putting up, if they can look at the information thoughtfully. This is well documented that this operation was undergoing.
Yeah, so I'll just read a few sentences from this. On November 22nd, 1990, the European Parliament passed a resolution on Operation Gladio. It's called Joint Resolution Replacing B3-2021 and several others. A, having regard to the revelation by several European governments of the existence for 40 years of a clandestine parallel intelligence and armed operations organization in several member states of the community. And whereas for over 40 years this organization has escaped all democratic controls and has been run by the secret services of these states in collaboration with NATO, and C, fearing the danger that such clandestine network may have interfered illegally in the internal political affairs of member states or may still do so. And it goes on. And the last point is that the European Parliament instructs its president to forward this resolution to the Commission, the Council, the Secretary General of NATO, the governments of the member states, and the United States government. So I think as we watch this story being told by our media, the media that we know we can't really trust on important issues, and how there is no questions being asked. They are blaming it on ISIS, and we have to keep in mind that a lot of people say that ISIS is funded by the United States and its allies, and personally, I believe that that certainly may be true. I can't say that it is true, but it's so widely reported in other parts of the world that it has to be considered. It's not a secret to our media, but they will not tell it to us. So the question of who is ISIS and who is running ISIS has got to be kept in mind as our media spreads hate towards people who are Muslims. And we just have to keep in mind the possibility that this is a false flag operation. There has to be an independent investigation. It's like the entire world has been cast a little onto its side by what happened, and they seem to be pushing for war, the war of civilizations that was talked about by the so-called neocons in the United States prior to 9/11. They seem to be moving us in those directions. And while we're focused on fighting ISIS, the corporations are taking over the world.
Yeah. Now, I mean, look, we just should be asking more questions. That's all. Let's continue asking questions. For instance, Operation Gladio, why would we assume that they have just gone away and dispersed? You know, there's no evidence of that whatsoever. And you know, why wouldn't they have just become more sophisticated with the new intelligence gathering, you know, abilities that they have now? You know, it's no reason for us to assume that they have.
They have a history of carrying out bombing attacks in order to get what they want.
Now look at the Paris killings. Look at the Charlie Hebdo killings. Look at the London bombings in 2007. If you look at some of the key elements, they all fit a certain pattern, and we could talk more about that. But I think the thing is this. They're blaming the Islamic State. They're saying these are the terrorists. And the question that popped into my mind just a few moments ago is, are the people who created the Islamic State, could they not also be the same people who created Operation Gladio? Could they possibly be the same entity? Could they possibly be, in fact, the same intelligence agencies?
Yeah. And so the Western, especially the United States and the CIA and the NATO intelligence agencies, created Operation Gladio and used it basically to keep themselves in power over decades. A lot of people say that the U.S. and its allies are funding and created ISIS. It's certainly possible given what we know about how they, Osama bin Laden worked for the CIA. I mean, that seems to be just historical fact. So we're at such an important moment, it seems, right now, where we're being pushed, it seems, into a war against.
Exactly. But you know, Jack, I really think the same interests are there The Islamic State, to me, is created just in the same way as they've created all sorts of other fabrications. It's a very convenient enemy.
Yes.
And now that we can blame these bombings on them,
Yes.
we already know they're capable of pulling these bombings off, and this is well documented.
And when you say they, that the Western nations.
Well, yes.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
the
they've done
people,
it
the
before.
intelligence agencies that created Operation Gladio.
Yes.
You know, and you can get into bore down into that and talk for ages about it, but the interests are there. I don't think this is a wild speculation. Now, the other thing I think we should always do, and this is not a bad idea, is that it's a crime. What happened in Paris was a crime. There was people were killed. There was criminal activity. And, you know, we should be asking the fundamental questions in a crime. Who had the motive to do the crime? Who had the opportunity? Who had the ability to do it? Who profits from the crime? Who pays from the crime? I mean, these are standard investigation questions that anybody that's going to investigate this should be asking these questions. And by the way, everybody's a suspect until you rule them out. The range of suspects narrows pretty quickly. And all of a sudden you do realize that these people behind Operation Gladio appear to fit the bill quite well for motive and opportunity and capabilities to pull off the crime. They fit the bill quite well. Now, this is just standard investigation techniques. We're not launching off into any wild other ideas. We're just sticking with the facts. Why can't we do that, Jack? Why is it that our media has taken this away from us? And as you said, why can't we have an independent investigation of this crime by people that we can trust? I don't think at this point we can trust the French Secret Service or the French police or any involvement there, because they are at this point still a suspect.
Yeah, I think that we have to just ask the questions. We can't accept the official story. The official story has been a lie forever. I mean, from the fact that if you Google Bush, Hitler, and Guardian, you'll see the story in the British newspaper about how corporate America funded Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. So if you know that, then everything else becomes possible. I mean, if corporate America was funding Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, which is just historic fact, then how can we say that how can we believe the official story that's being told to us now about what happened in Paris? We've got to get beyond that and below that, because this is just too dangerous a time. The media is pushing fear and anger and hate and war.
Well, yeah, and
we've got to be careful.
People that are thinking clearly have to step ahead, step up here. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid of the media and this wave of hatred that's sweeping over people. Just stay clear-headed, and I think we just got to keep asking the questions. You know, something that occurred to me. You know, of course, in this scenario, these sort of attacks that happened that put fear in the hearts of people, and then they give up all their civil liberties to the government, perhaps the very same people who did the crime, and you know, they basically say, please help us, protect us from a terrorist. And I was wondering about this, because I was talking to people about it, and that one frightening scenario is the terrorists want to harm us, and we have to do something to take them.
And people believe it.
But what is even more frightening, and I think why we can't go there, what's even more frightening is the scenario that we're painting, the possible scenario that the very agencies in government that are supposed to be protecting us are in fact attacking us. And I think that is a block for most people. It's too frightening to go there. They would rather stay back in the old story of the terrorists and all that. And I think we're locked into this paradigm that we're really in trouble right now, because those of us that are trying to ask these questions, you know, are being vilified. And we're just trying to dig in here and trying to find out who actually pulled off this crime. And I think right now there has to be a lot more courage being shown by people who want to get to the truth. We have to examine this issue, and we have to avoid what could be a very, very serious set of circumstances that could occur now with involving warfare and other things that are very, very dangerous.
Yeah. I completely agree. So I don't disagree with people who believe the official story. I mean, you know, I believed it myself for a big part of my life. But we have to know the truth. That's all I'm saying, and I think that's all you're saying. Let's find out the truth. The official story may not be that truth. And before this segment ends, just one more thing. There seems to be a surge of racism and anti-Muslim propaganda in the media. And we have a volunteer reporter who is preparing a report about this issue. And we invite you to send us any comment and recommendation to assist in this little reporting job. If you notice what you think is anti-Arab and anti-Muslim reporting in our corporate media, please just send an email, because if that's the case, then I mean that is the promulgation of possibly the promulgation of hate, and shouldn't be allowed. So thank you very much for watching this segment of Citizen.